Then the unimaginable. Police, fire and ambulance workers all caught together with those still trying to leave the area as one tower collapsed, spraying tons of concrete, metal and other debris hundreds of yards. The amateur cameraman who shot this footage soon found he was nowhere near far away enough from the towers.
I mean, looking at it now, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, that's the only word to describe it. It's just, you can't fathom that something like this would happen, and then certainly that a 110, 107, 110-story building would just come crashing down like that. And certainly we thought, I mean, we were half a block away, and when we heard the residual explosion, people just started running.
Need some water.
Here. Get the cameras out of here, let's go! Get off now, go!
With no idea how many new casualties they were leaving behind, many rescuers simply had to run for their lives, as did those trying to cover the unfolding scene.
All the people traffic was running up. And I'm looking up, I'm trying to call the station, trying to find where we are. And I look up and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman, he said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon too.
The immense scale of this attack was becoming clear to the watching world. But down on the ground, with phone and power out, coordinating the response was already near impossible. Evacuating the complex web of densely packed buildings, painfully chaotic.
We tried to do a floor-by-floor search. New York City Police, the Fire Department, Port Authority Police, best they could, tried to get everybody out. But as you know, there were people still coming out after that building came down.
Do you have any idea how many people would normally be in the building at 8:30 or north?
This is the Alan Reiss.
There are probably 10,000 people in each tower. 10,000 people in each tower would typically be in there on a normal business day. And we get about another 5,000 visitors during the course of the entire day. So by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the building should have been full.
New York's emergency services were overwhelmed. Even now, there is frankly no idea of how many casualties there will have been or how many dead. It was election day in New York. The mayor, Rudy Giuliani, suspended the poll and, advising New Yorkers to stay calm, also promised justice.
It's one of the most heinous acts, certainly in world history. And as the governor said, and I said to the president, we fully and completely support him in any action that he has to take in order to make an example out of the people who are responsible for this.
Uptown, in an amazingly unscathed Times Square, the city watched in horror on the big screen.
I've never had a feeling in the city like this. Everybody is like frozen. I mean, this is like, if they can do this, what's next?
He has perhaps articulated the fears tonight of America.
Krishnan Guru Murthy reporting. In New York is Richard Murphy, former Assistant Secretary of State and former Ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Ambassador, let me talk to you first as a New Yorker. How's it been?
Well, it's been eerie. The pictures are ghastly on the television, the radio coverage. We're about 5 miles north in central Manhattan of the World Trade Towers, so we're not getting the smoke up here. We're getting very light traffic, but there still are taxis moving. There are pedestrians out on the street, but clearly it's not in anything like the intensity of New York traffic this time of day on a weekday.
Then turning to your role as a former diplomat, I mean, obviously a lot of people are looking to bin Laden in Afghanistan, possibly somebody somewhere else in the Middle East. Do you have thoughts about this?
My first thought is that the less public speculation, the better. For this reason, I don't want to see our investigators closing off any avenue of inquiry. It's been all too easy to say the name Osama bin Laden, the world mind, the organizer of world terrorism, and not to realize that behind him or with him is a whole network of organizations which he very likely has no control over. And when you emphasize the individual, I think you you only risk following up other leads in the investigation.
Well, let me just ask you this. I mean, is your sense one of reprisal or of a need eventually at some stage to address where it is these people come from and the problems that produce suicide activity like this?
No, it's both, John. It's both. I think the example set in the Clinton administration was perhaps not the happiest one when, in a reprisal against the bombing of our embassy in Kenya and in Tanzania, there was the strike on what turned out to be apparently a normal pharmaceutical plant in Khartoum. Now, we struck eastern Afghanistan, we struck a training center of Osama bin Laden. Did we get Osama? No. Should we have ever expected to? Not at all. So I hope that the reprisals will be measured and as a result of the most careful of investigations. But yes, where are these people coming from? Why are they coming at us? That question has to be answered. The first questions are going to be more domestic. How did the FBI, the CIA let us down? That's going to be the question that the U.S. Congress will start in on immediately.
Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. Let me turn now to Abdel Bari Atwan. He's the editor of Al-Quds, the Palestinian newspaper here in London. There you heard somebody who's been right at the centre of American policy in this region. You know bin Laden, and I believe you picked up some thought that he was planning something 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, actually, there were a lot of, reports that he is planning something big because, this man he declared his war against the United States a long time ago. He issued a fatwa, which is Islamic ruling, to attack American interests and American personnel. So he is not afraid of any accusation. And also he blessed all attacks against the American embassies and the American coal destroyer in Aden. So, he is not ashamed of this, even if he did it. But, this work...
This is a man holed up in the Afghan mountains. I mean, how does he do it?
Well, actually, I'm telling you, John, there is dissatisfaction of the American foreign policy. The anti-American feeling is in its peak in the Muslim world, and especially nowadays, people can see the Israeli, the major ally of the United States in the Middle East, are killing Palestinians.
That doesn't deliver the neo-military precision that produced 4 hijackings, produced targets that were hit. This is a highly sophisticated action.
Definitely, because, now, those Islamic fundamentalists are not stupid as some people imagine. I believe most of the recruits around bin Laden, they are graduates from American universities, some of them engineers, architects, even chemical expert. So you expect him to have a very sophisticated network. Beside that, if you remember what happened to the coal, the American destroyer, when it was attacked in Aden, it needs a lot of coordination, a lot of sophistication, monitoring to the American Navy until they struck. And when they struck, it was very painful.
You're suggesting that if Western intelligence had any intelligence, they would have predicted that this kind of thing was the next step that was going to be approached?
Yeah, they must predict this if they are really intelligent enough, because people are not stupid anymore. The Americans are not the most intelligent people. While you are working to counter terrorism, there are also the other people actually who are trying to counter the American security organization.
Abdel Bari Atwan, thank you. Now, this catastrophe has left the whole of America in shock and on high alert. One leading senator said it was the second Pearl Harbor, just as devastating a blow to America's security and national pride. Hospitals in Washington and New York are preparing for an unknown number of casualties. There are queues of people waiting to give blood, and there have been appeals on television for still more to do so. Mark Easton looks back at a day which brought terror to an entire superpower.
The United States of America is on a war footing. At the Pentagon, where smoke still billows from the attack, some of the most senior military figures have assembled in the National Military Command Center to coordinate the response. Troops are on heightened alert across the continent, nowhere more so than in the nation's capital.
Here in Washington, D.C., we are at threat condition Delta. That is the highest condition that we can go to. That is the absolutely appropriate thing to do given the events of this morning. What seems to have happened is that we had an aircraft intentionally fly into the Pentagon. There were intense fires following the aircraft's impact into the building. Arlington search and rescue personnel are just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense.
It was less than an hour after the World Trade Center crashes in New York that a third hijacked passenger plane was crashed deliberately into the Pentagon. This symbol of America's military might proved powerless to defend against a coordinated terrorist assault. The impact was on the Army section of the Pentagon, where some of the US's most senior officers would have been working. Billows of smoke drifted over the Potomac River towards the US capital, Washington, the most powerful city on the planet, now in panic.
Metal and other debris hundreds of yards. The amateur cameraman who shot this footage soon found he was nowhere near far away enough from the towers.
I mean, looking at it now, I mean, it's just...
Then the unimaginable. Police, fire and ambulance workers all caught together with those still trying to leave the area as one tower collapsed, spraying tons of concrete.
Dual explosion, people just started running.
Need some water.
Here. Get the cameras out of here, let's go! Get off now, go!
With no idea how many new casualties.
It's unbelievable. I mean, that's the only word to describe it. It's just, you can't fathom that something like this would happen, and then certainly that a 110, 107, 110-story building would just come crashing down like that. And certainly we thought, I mean, we were half a block away, and when we heard the residuals
they were leaving behind, many rescuers simply had to run for their lives, as did those trying to cover the unfolding scene.
All the people traffic was running up. And I'm looking up, I'm trying to call the station, trying to find where we are. And I look up and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a